So, the creators of ransomware are always looking for an extra bite at the cherry of getting the ransoms out of their victims. Now, at the moment, they infect systems, they harvest credentials, they exfiltrate data, and at the very last moment they encrypt as much data as they can and then ask in the first instance for a ransom for the victim to get their data back. In the second instance, a ransom to stop that data being revealed to the world. Now in 2022 we've seen two more types of payloads, and these are used in a scenario where you don't pay the first ransom or the second ransom, so they will brick some of the devices within your infrastructure just to show their intent and then maybe raise the ransom at the same time. And if you don't pay that, they will then use the wiping technique to just wipe all the data off your system in a kind of scorched earth policy. So let's look at how brickers and wipers work. Now, bricking is the process of rendering devices within your network and infrastructure completely useless. And it's done by gaining privileged access to the device and then changing one or two locations in the firmware or in the EEPROM or in the flash memory. Now, the two places that get chosen will be part of the boot up sequence, maybe to send it back to the beginning of the boot up sequence so it never does anything, or in the case of devices with secure boot, to corrupt the key store within the device so the keys no longer match the firmware and it won't start. Now, the way that bootloaders are put onto devices in the first place is generally at the PCB manufacture stage, where a set of pins come down and load the bootloader onto the system. So now, to recover those devices, they've got to go back to the manufacturers, the PCBs have got to come out, and the bootloaders have got to be reflashed back in again. And that's not economically viable, and that's why bricking costs you so much. The process of wiping is the business of rendering data on disk drives completely useless. Now, disk drives are laid out with a partition table. Each partition table has a file allocation table within it. Sometimes it has a master boot record, and then the files are laid out. Files generally have a file header that tells you what the rest of the file is and how big it is and all the rest of it. And the wiping process attacks the partition table, the file allocation table, the master boot record, and then diagonally writes zeros across the file headers. And the sort of files that they go for are your backups, your snapshots, your configurations, and your preferences, because these are the most expensive to repair. And that process puts all of that data beyond the reach of data recovery companies. So, in terms of attack vectors, bricking uses privileged access to the devices, either through credentials or through keys. Wiping, on the other hand, uses local admin rights, which is getting from the context of the user. And this is where Assyrium comes in. We have privileged access management that separates your users from the privileged credentials, so the attackers can't harvest them and they can't make the jump to the devices. And in terms of wiping, you can remove local admin rights from your users, so the user's own rights are not being hijacked to drive the software that is going to wreck the disks that they use. Beyond that, we have privileged process automation, which separates the users from just about everything, and it's a pretty interesting process. So, if you're interested in any of this or the Assyrium products, please get in touch.